He didn't look like much, just another dusty drifter with too many miles behind him and nothing ahead. But what happened when Sterling Maddox rode into that worn-out frontier town would forever reshape what he believed about people, trust, and second chances. The sun hung low as Sterling's weary horse plodded toward the cluster of buildings that passed for a town. He swayed slightly in the saddle, each movement stiff with exhaustion. His face, browned by sun and weather, bore the story of hardship too long endured. His shirt clung loose on a frame whittled down by hunger, and the eyes beneath his hat brim carried the hollow, haunted look of a man who no longer expected anything good from the world. The town didn't look much livelier than he felt. A scattering of slanted buildings stood like tired old men leaning into each other for balance. As Sterling guided his mount through the center, his stomach clenched with the dull ache of going days without real food. He'd nearly forgotten what warmth or comfort felt like, and the few coins rattling in his pocket offered little hope of either. He spotted a modest building up ahead, a boarding house. Judging by the handmade sign out front, it was the only place in sight that looked like it might offer shelter. He slid off the saddle, nearly collapsing as his legs struggled to hold him. The long ride from the wreckage of his former life had drained every last reserve. Still, he tied his horse to the worn hitching post, knowing this was likely his last shot at rest. Before he could knock, the door creaked open and a woman stepped out onto the porch. Her eyes met his, gentle, searching, as if she could see everything he'd been through without him saying a word. She wore a plain dress patched in places and hands that bore the roughness of honest work. Her voice, soft and warm, cut through the dusty silence. "You look like you need food and a place to lie down." Sterling removed his hat, unsure how to respond. Most folks in towns like this looked right past men like him, or worse, saw them as trouble. "I don't mean to impose, ma'am. I've got almost nothing to pay with," he said honestly. She didn't flinch, didn't frown, just looked at him with the kind of compassion he hadn't seen in years. "Money's not always the price for kindness," she said gently and stepped aside. "Come in, Mr. Maddox." Something shifted the moment he stepped through the door. The air inside felt warm and real, scented with herbs and bread, like comfort itself. For the first time in what felt like forever, a fragile hope flickered inside him. But he didn't know then that Mercy Whitmore and her friend Violet McCall had been waiting specifically for someone like him. She led him through the humble space, its wooden floors creaking softly under their steps. The savory smell of stew made his stomach twist painfully. There was something in Mercy's voice earlier, "someone like you," that unsettled him. What had she meant? A boy peeked at him from behind a chair. He couldn't have been more than 8, with a face that mirrored Mercy's. In his small hands, he held a carved horse toy, clearly handmade with care. Sterling felt a pang. He used to make things like that for his nephew before everything fell apart. "Tommy, say hello to Mr. Maddox," Mercy called with a soft smile. "He'll be staying for a while." Sterling blinked. A while. He hadn't agreed to anything beyond the night. But before he could respond, footsteps echoed from the rear, and another woman appeared. Violet McCall entered the room like a gust of dry wine, sharp and commanding. Her eyes were steel, her hair auburn and pulled back tight. She carried herself with the kind of confidence earned from standing alone too many times. A teenage girl trailed behind her, mirroring Violet's fierce expression and proud posture. "So this is him," Violet said flatly, her gaze raking over him. He felt like livestock under her inspection. Sterling stiffened. "Strong enough," she muttered under her breath, though not quietly enough to miss. Strong enough for what? His instincts prickled, tired though they were. This didn't feel like simple hospitality anymore. "Violet," Mercy said sharply, her tone a subtle warning. "Let the man eat first. Business can wait." Sterling's hand twitched toward his hip, where his revolver used to hang. He'd sold it for feed weeks ago. "Look, if I've misunderstood, if there's any confusion, I'm not looking for trouble. Just a night of rest." Again, the women exchanged glances. Mercy smiled as though nothing was amiss, but Violet's expression stayed hard, calculating. "Of course," Mercy said smoothly as she began filling a bowl. "You look like you've been through hell. Let's get some food in you first." Sterling accepted the stew with hands that trembled slightly from the effort of staying upright. He should have asked more questions, but hunger drowned caution, whatever this was. It could wait another few spoonfuls. The meal was simple vegetables, bits of meat, broth, but it might as well have been a king's feast. He hadn't tasted anything that rich in months. Mercy moved quietly round the kitchen, keeping his bowl full without asking, while Violet sat across from him, arms crossed, watching. Always watching. Tommy, now more comfortable, talked easily about his wooden toy, asking if Sterling knew how to carve things. Sterling nodded vaguely, but part of him remained alert, trying to figure out what kind of business he'd walked into. The food filled his belly, but the air stayed thick, like a storm waiting to break. Whatever Mercy and Violet wanted, it wasn't just to offer shelter to a broken cowboy out of the kindness of their hearts. Still, he said nothing. Not yet. He needed rest. He needed to think. But deep down, a voice whispered that these women had plans, and Sterling Maddox might be right in the middle of them. ***. He wasn't sure if he'd ever seen wild mustangs before, but the boys' curious chatter gave him something to focus on besides the tense silence hanging between the two women. Even Clara, the girl Violet had introduced as her daughter, seemed to pick up on the undercurrents brewing in the room. "Ma, just tell him already," Clara said, her teenage bluntness cutting through the forced small talk. "He's going to find out either way." Violet turned to her with a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "CL, go see if Mrs. Patterson next door needs help with the laundry. Her husband's been down sick all week." Clara rolled her eyes but didn't argue, tossing on her shawl and stepping out. As the door clicked shut behind her, the mood in the room thickened, pressing in from all sides. Sterling slowly set his spoon down and leaned back in his chair, his instincts finally overcoming his appreciation for the warm meal. "All right," he said, his voice carrying the calm strength of someone who once led men and held land of his own. "You've clearly got something on your minds. Let's not dance around it. What exactly do you want from me?" Mercy twisted her hands in her lap, clearly nervous, but Violet didn't hesitate. She leaned forward, her gaze steady. "We need a man here, Mr. Maddox, someone who can handle repairs, settle disputes, and help this place look like a proper household." Sterling raised an eyebrow. "You want me as a handyman more than that," Mercy said softly, finally taking a seat at the table. "We need a father figure for our children, someone dependable, someone who can give them safety and a sense of family." The words landed hard. Sterling glanced between the two women, trying to understand if he was hearing them right. "Are you saying you want me to marry one of you?" Violet's short laugh carried no amusement. "Both, technically, but not in any official way, just enough to present a united front." Sterling stood up abruptly, the legs of his chair scraping loudly across the wooden floor. "Ladies, you've got the wrong man. I'm not looking for a wife, definitely not two. And I sure as hell am not father material." "Sit down," Mercy said, and the edge in her voice made him pause. The gentle woman who'd welcomed him and was gone. In her place was someone who knew how to fight for what mattered. "You haven't heard everything yet." Despite himself, Sterling eased back into the chair. Maybe it was the food. Maybe it was the bone-deep weariness he'd been carrying for months, but he stayed. Violet continued, "Running a boarding house as to single mothers has its challenges. Men don't respect us. They try to push us around. Travelers don't trust us. Our children are growing up without male guidance. But if there's a man here, someone they can't ignore, things change. We get respect. We get protection." For the first time, Sterling began to understand what was really going on. This wasn't some spontaneous request. It was a calculated offer, a plan. And what caught him off guard was the growing part of him that wasn't entirely opposed to it. "You want me to act as your husband, to the town, not act," Mercy replied gently but firmly. "Live with us. Help us. Be part of this family. You'd have a roof over your head, food in your belly, and people who count on you again." The idea settled on him like a weighted coat. For 2 years, he drifted from town to town, losing everything after his land dried up and the debts caught up. The thought of being needed again, it stirred something in him he thought was long buried. Violet wasn't done. "You should know we're on the edge." Mercy's husband died in a mine collapse, left her with bills and not much else. Mine ran off with a saloon girl and took every cent we had saved. We've patched things together best we can, but we're barely hanging on. Sterling took in the room with fresh eyes, the worn spots covered by furniture, the mended wallpaper, the frayed curtains. These women were doing everything they could just to stay afloat. The town council wants us gone, Mercy added, voice low. They don't like single women running a business. They make up reasons to fine us, steer customers away, make it harder every month. But if a man's name is on the papers, they'll have to deal with us differently. Violet finished. You'd handle that side. We'd handle everything else. Sterling's chest ached. He hadn't been able to save his own land. He'd failed when it really counted. How could he believe he could help them now? And what about other expectations? He asked carefully, unsure how to say what he really meant. Mercy's cheeks flushed, but Violet gave a straight answer. If you're asking whether this involves our beds, no. That's not part of the deal. This is about survival. What happens after? Well, that's not something we're planning right now. A small figure appeared in the doorway. Young Tommy, rubbing his eyes. Ma, he asked sleepily, is Mr. Maddox really staying with us? Clara said he might be our new paw. Sterling looked at the boy. He saw something raw and hopeful in those eyes, something that cut deeper than any argument. He remembered that same kind of hope once, before loss took it away. We're still talking, sweetheart, Mercy said gently, scooping him up and kissing his forehead. Why don't you get ready for bed? The boy nodded and shuffled away, leaving behind a silence more loaded than before. That night, Sterling lay on a narrow cot in the small back room they'd given him, staring up at the ceiling as doubts gnawed at him. He could hear the faint voices of the women talking through the walls, but he couldn't make out the words. He thought of saddling his horse and slipping away at dawn, but he didn't. Something rooted him to that bed. The next morning, he found Mercy in the kitchen frying eggs, while Violet sat in a corner stitching up a curtain. The scent of coffee filled the air. Clara sat helping Tommy trace letters on a slate board. For a brief, impossible second, it felt like a real home. Sterling accepted the mug of coffee Mercy handed him, letting the warmth thaw the chill in his hands. I've been thinking about what you said, he began. Violet looked up, sharp-eyed and expectant. And I've got some conditions, he said, surprised at the calm in his voice. First, I want to know exactly what you expect of me. No surprises, no hidden conditions surfacing down the line, Sterling said. Fair enough. Violet agreed with a small nod. You'd handle all dealings with outsiders, Mercy added. Suppliers, customers, officials, fix things around the house, help with the heavy lifting. You'd be a father figure to the kids, teach them, guide them, and in return room, food, a share in whatever profit comes from the boarding house. A place to belong, she added softly. That last phrase hit something hollow in Sterling's chest. A place to belong. He couldn't remember the last time he'd truly had that. There's one more thing, he went on, pausing. This part wasn't easy to say. If this arrangement stops working for anyone, we walk away. No bitterness, no strings attached. The two women exchanged a look, something unspoken passing between them. Then Violet gave a slow nod. And one more thing, Sterling added, voice quieter now. I've failed before. Lost my ranch, lost everything I'd worked for. I'm not sure I'm the man you're hoping I am. Mercy's expression changed gentler, something maternal flickering in her eyes. Mr. Maddox, we're not looking for perfect, we're looking for present. Before he could respond, the sound of heavy boots thudded across the porch outside. That Violet moved to the window and stiffened. It's Mayor Hutchkins, she said tightly, and the sheriff's with him. Sterling saw both women shift in an instant. Mercy's warmth disappeared, replaced by alert tension. Violet straightened, her entire posture braced. What are they after? He asked. Nothing good, Violet muttered as the knocking began. Sterling rose without thinking. These women had given him something he hadn't dared ask for: trust, a place, a role. Now they faced the very kind of harassment they'd warned him about. This was his first test, time to prove he was worth betting on. He moved with Violet toward the door, heart pounding. Mayor Hutchkins was a round man with beady eyes full of suspicion. The sheriff beside him was tall, lean and calm, his hand resting loosely but intentionally. On his gun belt, Mrs. Whitmore. Mrs. McCall, the mayor said with an oily grin. Hope the morning finds you well. And this gentleman, Sterling stepped in before they could answer. He straightened to his full height, calling on years of ranch leadership, letting that quiet authority settle into his voice. Sterling Maddox, he said, hand outstretched. I'm head of this household. The mayor raised a brow, shooting a quick look at the sheriff. Head of household, that's news to us. Didn't hear about any marriages taking place. Recent development, Sterling replied smoothly, though his heart beat like a war drum. What brings you by? Sheriff Coleman spoke, his voice as direct as his posture. We've had complaints, violations, inappropriate activity, noise, unchaperoned male guests, questions about the moral structure of this home. Sterling knew this game. He'd seen it in other frontier towns. Vague allegations, thinly veiled threats used to drive out the unwanted. Well, Sterling said evenly, things have changed. These ladies are under my care now. This house is respectable. Nothing improper's happening under this roof. Protection. The sheriff repeated, voice sharp. Funny word, usually backed by legal documents, like marriage certificates. Sterling felt the weight of their expectations behind him. Tommy's small voice floated down the hall, asking what the men wanted. That question settled it. The paperwork's being arranged, he said, sounding more confident than he felt. In the meantime, are you here to conduct business, or just to loiter? The mayor's face tightened. Routine inspection, Mr. Maddox. All boarding houses are subject to them. We'll need to look around, speak with the guests. Of course, Sterling said, stepping aside. Just remember there are families here, children. I trust you'll act with decency. As the officials entered, Sterling caught Violet's eye. She gave him a slight nod of approval, though her jaw was tight with worry. This was just the beginning, whatever Hutchkins really wanted. It wasn't a loose curtain or a noisy night. The inspection dragged on. Every loose nail and frayed drape was written down. The sheriff interviewed boarders like they were suspects. Through it all, Sterling stayed close, fielding questions, making clear that no one spoke to the women without going through him first. But when they entered the children's room, everything changed. Mayor Hutchkins watched Tommy show Clara his carved horse. To families under one roof, he said, children from different mothers sharing space. That doesn't meet the town's standards of proper family structure. Sterling had held back long enough. You questioning my ability to care for my family, Mayor? He asked, voice hardening. Now, the mayor replied quickly. No need for hostility. You want to talk about Proper? Sterling said. Proper's a man who works, who protects and provides. Proper's women keeping a decent house open to travelers in need. Proper's not men using their badge to bully people trying to build something good. The room went still. Even the children froze, sensing the electricity in the air. Mercy looked pale, but Violet stood taller. Sterling saw something like admiration flicker in her eyes. Is that a threat? The sheriff asked, his hand now openly resting on his weapon. Sterling smiled cold and steady. Not a threat, just a fact. Harassing this family stops today. If you've got charges, file them. If not, get off our porch. For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Sterling felt Tommy's hand slip into his. Then, with a sharp snap, the mayor shut his notebook. We'll be back, he said, next time. We expect proper documentation of this setup. You do that, Sterling replied. But everything will be in order. As the men left, Sterling understood what had happened. By defending these women, he had done more than fill a role. He had stepped into a bond stronger than any paperwork. Later, as the house grew quiet, Sterling sat on the porch watching the golden light fade from the sky. Mercy brought him a cup of coffee, and something deep inside him settled. For the first time in years, he felt at peace. The arrangement had started from need. But what they were building now, it was something else entirely. Not just survival, but family, a home forged through choice, not blood. And as Violet joined them with her own cup and the stars began to show, Sterling knew he had found what he hadn't even realized. He'd been searching for, a place he could finally call home.